Hello, and thank you again for watching. I'm so happy that you're able to join me in this session this week. My name is Mucho Balinda, and this week we're going to continue on our topic of how to understand people, and more specifically, how to flourish in a multicultural environment. So we'll continue building on that topic. And today I'm going to share 3 secrets, 3 keys, 3 elements that will help you flourish, that will help you thrive in a multicultural environment. So stay tuned. I'll share those elements toward the end of the video. Now, imagine that you are at the grocery store. You're going to buy some produce. And while you're stopping at one of the tables to check the prices, you see a man who's walking with a child who's about 2 or 3 years old. And as they approach you, you hear the boy talk to the man and say, "Daddy, do they have the ladies here?" You start wondering what's going on. And the father replies and say, "What did you say? Do they have the ladies here?" The father responds and say, "I don't know." And then the son or the boy comes back with a statement and told the father, "Daddy, you know what? I love the ladies. They're so yummy." Now, imagine what would go through your mind. This is a 3-year-old or 2-year-old who's saying that he loves the ladies because they're yummy. Well, what would go through your mind? If that were me, I would say, what is this father teaching to his son? Why is this son talking about loving the ladies? At 3 years old, it's too early. Maybe somebody else would reach for the phone to call CPS and say, this father is abusing the son. Why is the son talking about the ladies in this way? This story is not a made-up story. It's something that happened. It happened to me. Now, I am that father. I was with my son at one of the grocery stores, and we were going to buy some produce when my son asked the question and made the statement. At first, I didn't know what he was talking about, but later, as he said that they're yummy, I knew exactly what he was talking about. Now, to give you some context, in our household, we eat a lot of apples, and there's one specific variety that we like the most. It's called the Pink Lady. So we buy the Pink Lady apples all the time. And as a result, we've called them the ladies. So when my son tells me that he loves the ladies because they're yummy, he's not talking about ladies. He's not talking about women. He's talking about these apples, the Pink Lady apples. Now you can understand how just from hearing what the boy said or what my son said, you may have ideas flowing through your mind. And how many times do we find ourselves judging situations and or people just because of what we heard or what we saw? How many times do we do that? But what we heard and what we saw lacks an important element, the context. Like in the example of my son, the context is the pink ladies. It's the apples that we are talking about. Now, somebody who's not internal to our family, to our household, they will have difficulty understanding what my son is talking about. Now, those who thought that the father is crazy, or the father is teaching something bad to his son, they were right. Because they heard the words. They heard the words. And those words were, I love the ladies because they are yummy. Period. Now, without the background information, that message itself is not good. The father is guilty of whatever you're accusing him of. But once you learn the context, once you understand the background information, then you change your perspective. You start to seeing things for what they are. And when it comes to culture, we run into this problem all the time. At least I do. You see people engage in certain behavior, you hear them talk in a certain way, and you start asking yourself, why are they doing that? Why are they behaving that way? They're nasty. They're crazy. You see? You're just seeing things, you're just hearing things, but you don't know the context behind them. And that is a big no-no when it comes to culture. The words we use have meanings. However, the meanings, they may be different depending on who's communicating, where they're communicating, and when they're communicating. For instance, if someone is in danger or is in captivity and is forced to say something in order to portray a different image or show a different message, share a different message, while they're talking, they can use certain words or they can use some body language, can position their body in a certain way to send a message to their family or their friends. Because their friends, they know the person. They know what's normal. They know what's common behavior in their circle. And when they detect a behavior that's outside the norm, they'll understand something is wrong. They didn't say anything about danger. They didn't say anything, but it's just the words. It's just the body language, just the behavior that they portray while they're talking that sends a message. Now, sometimes we may think that this issue of communicating or not understanding words here and there is related or is only applicable to people coming from different cultures or who speak different languages. Not necessarily. You may have people who speak the same language, but they're unable to understand, or they have different meanings attached to certain words. I'll give you an example. When I was new in the United States, I had a chance of working at one of the 6 to 6 programs. And in that program, one of the kids I was helping came to me and showed me his pencil. So I saw that his pencil did not have an eraser. I reached out to my colleague because she was sitting next to the pencil box. I said, could you give me a rubber? My colleague looked at me with an expression that I did not understand. She said, what did you say? I repeated, can you give me a rubber? To which she laughed uncontrollably. And I did not understand her reaction. So I went ahead and picked up the rubber and gave it to the boy. It was then that my colleague understood what I was talking about. She knew that I was asking for an eraser. In the United States, when you say rubber, people see something else. They see rubber means condom. In other countries, other English-speaking countries, rubber means an eraser, or it could mean something else. So in my case, it meant an eraser. And so when I communicated that, I had a different reaction. And so sometimes we may say things to people. We may communicate with people trying to share a specific message. But based on the words that we use, the message received is totally different from the one we wanted to send. And this was my case here. I wanted an eraser, but I was asking for a condom. And that would have gotten me in trouble because of the word I chose to use. And so culture is a complex system made of different codes that define how people in a certain geographic location ought to behave. It defines how they talk, how they walk, how they greet each other, how they eat, how they dress, etc. And in order to be successful in any culture, one must be able to understand and to live by these codes on a daily basis. You go to the supermarket, remember how people greet each other. And people expect you to do your part. They won't say just because you are from a different country or you are from a different culture, they'll give you an exception. No. If you are going in certain circles, you need to play your part. If they put on a suit, you put on a suit. If they put on uniform, you put on uniform. That's their code, or that's how they do things in that particular area. For instance, when you go shopping in Africa, there is room. When they tell you the price, you can negotiate the price for anything, even at the grocery store. But here in the United States, when you go to the grocery store, whatever price they tell you is the price you're going to pay. So you know that when you go to the supermarket, there's no negotiation. But when you're in Africa, when you're going to the supermarket or you're going to the store or to the market, you know that you can negotiate. You can bargain. They tell you it's 100 shilling, you can say I'll give you 50 or I'll give you 60, whatever. So that is how they do things. But on this other side, there's no bargaining. Whatever price we tell you is the price you're going to pay. It's important to identify some of the codes that are commonly found in different places. Let's look at how people greet each other. Different places have different ways of greeting people. Some people shake hands. Some people kiss on the cheek. Some people rub their nose against each other's. Some people rub their eyelids or whatever on each other. Other people breathe the same air. So there are different ways of greeting people. However, there's some exceptions that are important to know. If you're going to a Muslim country or Muslim society, or you're meeting someone coming from one of the Muslim society, and it's somebody from the opposite sex, you know not to shake their hands because that's taboo in that culture. Or you go to the Middle East, or you're meeting your friends for food or whatever over there. For them, it's customary to kiss each other on the cheek. You see a man and another man kissing each other on the cheeks. But here in the United States, it's unacceptable. It's not done. Or I go to visit a society where they rub their nose together. If I go there and somebody comes to me and start rubbing their nose against mine, I'll say, what's going on? What are you trying to do to me? This is not acceptable. We don't do this. Now, going to a place like that, it's important to know these things in advance. It's important to do some research and know how people in that society behave or how they greet each other. Or when they come to you, to your country or your culture, it's important to understand how they do things. So if you see them try to greet you in their way, do not be surprised or do not be offended, because that's how they do things. Language is pretty big. The way we communicate, the words we use, they make a big difference. They can create war, they can start a war, and they can end a war. It depends on the words we choose. Remember the example I just gave a few minutes ago about the same word but having two different meanings depending on where the word is used. So when talking, We must be conscientious of our environment. The words we use, we need to know, do they mean the same thing for those people? If that's not the case, then we need to learn, we need to choose other words that may have similar meaning and use them instead if we want to have meaningful relationships with people from other cultures. I'll give you examples. When you go to Korea, to a restaurant, and they give you chips, the tortilla chips, I don't know if they have them, but if they give you chips, don't be tempted to ask for salsa, because they have a word in the language, in Korean language, that sounds similar to salsa, but it means something totally different. So you may ask for salsa, and you see reactions and people looking at you, and you're like, what did I do? I only asked for salsa. But in Korean language, the word salsa, it means diarrhea. That's why people will be giving you looks, and you may not understand what happened. Let me give another example. You may go to Portugal, and in the US, we usually say, oh, it's Friday, payday. In Portuguese, there's a word called payday. So it sounds like payday. So when you use it, you're talking about farting. And that will also bring people to give you looks and say, what's going on with this person? Why are they talking about farts here? So we need to understand those little things. What it's intriguing to me, or what fascinates me the most, is how body parts, our fingers, our mouths, our toes, our feet, they have different meanings. I just thought that body parts are body parts, but that's not the case. Depending on how you position your body parts, you can send strong messages to people, and they can respond in ways that you'll never anticipate. It's well known in the United States, when talking with people, keep your fingers in check. Try not to show the middle finger to anybody. That's well known in the United States because it's very offensive. Now, you go to other places, you show the middle finger, nobody will care because it doesn't mean anything to them. But go to other places and cross your fingers, you'll be calling for trouble. In Vietnam, for example, it means the female genitals. You do that to somebody, you're calling them that, and that will not bring a good reaction. People will not respond kindly when you do that. So you need to be aware of simple things or small things like that. They make a big difference. Or go to other places and cross your arms like this. They'll see you as an arrogant, and people will not approach you that easily because you're closing yourself off to others. So depending on where you are, it's important to know what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. Your behavior, you need to check it in relation with where you are. Go to an Arab country and put your feet up, show people the bottom of your feet. You'll be calling for trouble. You don't do that. Or hand somebody food with your left hand. That's an insult because the left hand is considered dirty. So you don't hand people food with your left hand. Very important to understand. These are small things, very small things, but they mean a lot. They can mean the difference between peace and war, or being shunned, or not being invited in social gatherings because you're considered unclean, or you're considered somebody who's not well-mannered. So, how does one flourish in a multicultural environment with all these elements that we just talked about? The greetings, the communication, the words and whatever. Before we can talk about how to flourish in a multicultural environment, it's important to understand that the things we just talked about are external things. They're just things that we can control externally, like how we greet people, how we present our body parts and all that. This is just external things. But there are other elements that are internal, that affect how people interpret the world around them, how they think. It creates a frame of how they interpret the world around them. And these are more difficult to deal with. For instance, you may come across a friend or a colleague or a neighbor whose way of solving problems or resolving conflict is all about involving the community. They cannot solve a problem without involving the community. And there are other people who, when there is a conflict, they start resolving the issue amongst themselves. There's no need to involve the community. You can see that there are two different perspectives here. One comes from a community perspective and one comes from an individualistic perspective. The individuals can solve their own problems. And on this other side, the community solves the individual's problems. Two different approaches. Now, what happens when those two have a conflict? How do you address their problem? How do you resolve their conflict? It's an interesting point. So we need to learn to understand that there are different ways of interpreting the world. There are different perspectives, cultural perspectives in the world. And if we are to thrive, we need to understand that and acknowledge it and accept that that's how it is. There is not just one perspective